My name is Julie Pearson, Little Thunder. Today is Thursday, December 16th, 2016. December 15th, that is. And I'm interviewing John Peacock as part of the Shalako interview series conducted by the Oklahoma Oral History Research Program at Oklahoma State University. John, you're Eastern Shawnee and Wyandotte, is
Yes.
that correct? A 1969 Shalako graduate.
Yes.
You spent 6 years in the Marine Corps and the Army before beginning your work with Indian Health Service in the mid-70s and joining the National Guard around that time. We'll be talking about some of your experiences and memories of Shalako and your life in the service. Thank you for taking the time to talk with me.
Thank you.
Where were you born and where did you grow up?
I was born in Claremore Indian Hospital in 1951, and I was raised in Miami by a single parent, and I lasted here in Miami until 1965 when I went off to Shalako.
Was it your mom who raised you?
Yes.
And what did she do also for a living?
She worked in garment factories throughout Miami, Commerce, Pettit Manufacturer, Burlington, Patterson, Glenberry's, before winding up in the ammunition factory in Parsons, Kansas, while I was going to Shalako.
Did you have any grandparents on either side?
Well, I had my grandparents that I knew were Amy Peacock. She was a blue jacket, and she was a sort of a single parent too. You know, her husband died of pneumonia back in 1935, and she raised 5 kids. And anyway, most of them all, with the exception of one, all went to Shalako, all went to Seneca Indian School, and that regard.
Were you around Shawnee Speakers at all growing up, or?
Other than my grandmother, you know, saying pass the bread or, you know, stuff like that, that's about it.
What schools did you go to before you attended Shalako?
Pershing School, and for 3 years, and then off to Washington, out in northern part of Miami, and then the 7th and 8th grade, Will Rogers Junior High.
How old were you when you went to Shalako then?
I was just turning 13, and the reason why I went to Shalako is because the academics or what have you, the town was sort of prejudiced. I felt. I mean, I had my little neighborhood, our gang, and they were really good people and still are to this day. But my mom talked me into going to Shalako, and I almost flubbed that up my freshman year, but I hung tough, and 4 years of it, and I have my friends throughout the United States, 23 states and 95 different tribes, and that's a blessing to me.
So there was kind of family history of people in your family on your grandma's side who'd gone to Shalako, and
yes.
What were your first impressions when you got there?
Well, I was in the oldest dormitory that, you know, Shalako had, home to, and the assimilation, you know, between the Plains Indians versus the Navajos.
Right.
And getting assimilated and trying to make friends with, you know, all tribes. But we had our Oklahoma bunch, and there was some that, you know, hung out with Washingtons and people from Montana. Mm-hmm. And the Navajos, they stayed to themselves, you know. But it took probably 3 years to get you know, make friends mm-hmm. with those.
But at home too, it was a pretty good intertribal mix at home too.
Yes.
What was one of the hardest adjustments you had to make to Shalako?
Getting into the freshman year, say like they stole my suitcase. It had my underwear, my socks, and a transistor radio, and I had to write my mom, because every time I wrote my mother, I'd get an allowance, you know, say like $1.25, and it took a little while for the mail to get to you. So I wrote her and I says, you know, I'm not getting accustomed to this place, and they're stealing my clothes. And so she wrote a nasty letter to the boys' guidance, and they had a shakedown, and they found them. And by the time I wrote her back, here's my mom and my aunt coming up to get me on Veterans Day. And the guidance department just sort of said, you know, go to town, talk it over, and if you want to leave, you know, you can leave. And so I did that. I says, well, I'll hang tough for the semester, and then I'll hang tough till the end of the school year. And I come home, and I was thinking I was going to enroll as a sophomore in Miami. Mm-hmm. And I wound up getting a welcome letter. And I says, I'm ready to go back to Shalako. And so I went back to Shalako and agriculture. I took ag when I first got my pig in my sophomore year. That was money. And so I stayed through the summers after my sophomore year, my junior year, and after I graduated. I still worked with, I started with Bureau of Indian Affairs then.
Mm-hmm. So going back to getting your first pig, because you really hadn't been working around a farm at all prior to that. And you were responsible, did you name it?
No, I didn't name it. I didn't name even my calves. I mean, you know, my junior year I had 2 calves, and my senior year I had 2 calves. Right. And that was money in my pocket.
Once you sold your animals at the end of the year, that money went to your account.
My account. Half of it went to your account, and half of it went to you.
Right. And
you wasn't allowed to get your money, the other half, until you graduated or your class graduated. And when I graduated, I had $946 out of my savings account, and I come home and bought a car.
That's a pretty good little chunk. When you were on campus, who were some of your more memorable teachers?
Mr. Wallace was sort of the administrative chief, and he was a really influential. Mrs. Engelke, she was a big old heavy-set lady that taught international relations and I guess history. And Mrs. Ankew, Melba Ankew, she was my freshman homeroom teacher. And those are some of them, but my ag instructors was, you know, the bigger part Mr. Livingston was the department head. Paul Michaels, Joe Nunn, Mr. Kelly, and while I was working there, Mr. Bushyhead, he taught me how to plow, use a tractor, and he caught my foot in a three-point hitch on a John Deere tractor.
Oh my goodness.
And I ended my baseball career.
Oh.
So those are some of the memorable
Right.
events.
Right.
And going to the state line, on weekends, having to trek probably about 2.5 miles or something like that over the fields to this place called the state line. It was sort of a cafe and a gas station. It was just to get away.
Just for an outing.
Yeah, get a hamburger.
You'd go, a bunch of you walk.
So that was sort of the memorable parts.
You mentioned that you had some student teachers from OSU.
Yes. They had a program that come in and interviewed us, talked to us, how would I say, cliques. They who we hung around with and who we how we got along, and say like even the guys from the Kiowas down around Lawton, they hung around together, and say like me being the only person from Ottawa County there, we hung around Ponca's. And to this day, like that, I have my Ponca brothers, and I've got friends all over the United States now. So I'm blessed by that.
What do you remember about the food?
The food? Here's the thing. My junior and senior year, we would, at noontime, say like we had ag, and we would get cleaned up. I mean, we'd go out and work in the fields in the mornings, like that, say like our senior year. And then come in, we'd get cleaned up, and we'd be 20 minutes into the lunch period. And there was a lady called Mrs. Benton, that was her name, and she was from around Ottawa County and what have you before. But she run the lunch counter, and she would not give seconds to the other people until all her ag boys were fed. And say like we would get piles of food, and say like drinking 4 glasses of milk, 3 pieces of bread with a lot of butter, and then getting ready for 1 o'clock class and falling asleep.
You were in the right field to study, weren't you?
I was going to Algebra 2 or wherever, Mr. Henderson, I think it was. And we played tricks on each other. So like if we caught somebody falling asleep, we would tape them to their chair, tie them to their chair, and we had a Eskimo person that was going to the same class, and he would take off his Wellington boots, and we would put them outside the window. And then when the the bell would ring for the changing of classes, he'd be looking for his boots. And then say like you trying to get up out of your chair and you're tied to your chair. So some of the tricks that they would play on you.
Right.
So those were memorable. I'll tell you about Mrs. Kirkland.
Okay, so how about your most memorable details?
Well, our details were, you know, where we had to perform a task, either cleaning TV room, break room, hallways, the bathrooms, stuff like that. But when we were seniors, a lot of us would stay in bed, and we were supposed to be up and going to the mess hall at 6:30 in the morning, and some of us were still in bed. And when the lady matrons would come through the rooms, she'd say we would jump up and jump in the closet. And Mrs. Kirkland was one of them that would say, "Too late, got you," you know, like that. And we'd get extra details for that. And the strange thing about Mrs. Kirkland, her husband was in welding, and she had 2 sons. And when she would come through, says, "I don't know why you guys jump in the closet," you know, like that, "because you ain't got anything I haven't seen before." It says, "I've got a husband and 2 boys at home," you know. So, but we used to be embarrassed in that regard.
Let's see. Were you aware of like some of the military activities on campus?
We heard of the National Guard, but I was too young for that.
Mm-hmm.
And but a lot of the benefits and everything, we never heard, you know,
Mm-hmm.
they were getting paid for it.
Right. They were getting paid for it. What was one of the toughest moments you experienced at the school?
Toughest?
Mm-hmm.
Probably my freshman year. I mean, you know, you'd get homesick.
Right.
And say, like, some of my friends, the last ones, could I mention the name of the people? Mm-hmm. Were the Knoll sisters. And their brothers had graduated earlier. And anyway, they were getting ready to go home in March, I guess it was, 2 weeks before Easter. And I says, "Please have your folks check me out so I could go home." And they checked out and never did come back. And say, like, those 2 weeks were the hardest time of my life. And I finally got home, and I didn't know whether I was going to go back to Shalako or not. But I mean, you know, I hung tough,
Mm-hmm.
finished the school.
So you didn't go with them,
No.
but you found another ride that way.
I used to get a ride down to Ponca City, and we'd take a bus
Okay.
from Ponca City to Tulsa, and then back up to Miami.
Right.
And then on Sundays, probably about 4:30 in the afternoon, I'd take a Continental Trailways all the way to Arch City, Kansas,
Mm-hmm.
and we'd get there about 9:30 at night. And the crazy thing about it is, say, like, you got your laundry clean, you got a big Sunday meal, and you got leftovers you could put in your suitcase and take back to school. And when you'd get home, or when you get to the dormitory, probably about 30 minutes later, then the matrons would smell the food. I mean, Ernest Topaw and John Beaver were the world's worst about finding food. And so, like, you were feeding your roommates, and that is some of the crazy things that would go on. And if you had money in your pocket, you know, the matrons would run to town and get you a hamburger. But you'd have to buy them a hamburger too. So some of the tricks.
Now you were allowed to bring back food, or
Yeah.
but it was just everybody knew.
Yeah. Everybody knew that
Including
the
the
food
matrons.
was here. Yeah,
Right.
especially the matrons.
They wanted to share too. So after you left Shalako, what decided you to? Did you enlist in the military, or were you drafted?
I did enlist, but I started to go to Okmulgee Tech. And anyway, I wanted to take diesel mechanics, but my mom talked me into taking accounting. And my accounting problems related to that, I didn't know I had the exact opposites of debits and credits, and that was my downfall. So I went on October the 28th, 1969. I went down and swore into the Marine Corps, and then I had a delayed entry. February of 1970, I went in the Marine Corps. In the meantime, between the end of October and February, I went back to Shalako and worked on the farm. And I was in the men's club. You know, they had separate from the students. And I drove my little car.
So you were like an employee for a few months.
Yeah, I was an employee for those few months.
Yeah.
And then I went off to the Marine Corps for those 3 years.
Where did you do your boot camp for the Marine Corps?
San Diego. And I wound
What
up.
was that like?
It was rough. I thought it was, you know, I didn't know if I was going to make it or not. But, through prayer and due diligence, I just hung tough and made it through.
Do you think your experiences at Shalako had an impact on the way you handled that boot camp experience?
Sure didn't hurt. I had good friends too, you know, and it's a blessing that I can say I went through it.
Were there any other Native recruits in your Marine Corps division initially?
There was one classmate from Oregon that wound up in there, and he come down with spinal meningitis, and I didn't see him after that. But anyway, they put us in isolation for a little while, for about a week, and then after that they really put us in the dirt. So
what kind of specialized training did you get in the Marine Corps?
Radio repair. I wound up there in San Diego for about, I think about 4 months before winding up in 29 Palms. And I didn't even get to repair a radio. I wound up in radio telegraph and wire before a couple months later I wound up in Yokosuka, Japan, working in a brig. And honor guards, parades, you name it, and training throughout, watching prisoners. So that was different anyway.
For sure. What were your impressions of Japan, I guess, when you got to go off base? Or?
I loved it. I loved it. We got away from the post. We got us an apartment, drank a lot of beer, sake, and stuff like that, but we always did our duties. And I was ready to come home after 21 months over there. And when
Did you write back home?
Huh?
Did you write
Yeah,
home and stuff?
I wrote occasionally, like that. But I come home after those 21 months. I was through with it, and I thought about re-enlisting, but I could not go from one Marine barracks to another, and that's say like McAllister. I wanted to go to McAllister and come back home, but they said, you can't do that. We'd put you in California or North Carolina, and I said, no way. So I come home and tried probably about 5 months, and then I wanted to still, I had the green still in my system, and I wound up going down to Fort Sill, and I just couldn't get a job around Tulsa. To say like, security in North Tulsa, no way. So I wound up in Fort Sill, and I went back into communications, and I started out as a wireman.
This time for the Army.
For the Army, and then I wound up in comm chief for an artillery unit, and I was there for 21 months before being shipped off to Germany for 15. And I think I got tired of being in green after that, but I wound up in the National Guard. And I was in so many different specialties, supply, armor, unit clerk, chaplain's assistant, administrative support.
Now, was this in the Guard, or was
this was in the Guard?
Once you joined the Guard, okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
And there was times that I grew my hair long. And back in the Nixon era, they authorized wigs. And I looked terrible. But it was the principle in the matter that I wore a wig, and it looked like a bird's nest on top of your head.
But you were able to keep your hair long.
But I sort of conformed. I mean, at times I kept my hair off, do various things. I got to the rank of staff sergeant, and it really didn't hurt on my retirement in that regard.
Now, around this time too, you began to work for Indian Health Service around the mid-70s. Yes. How did you end up going that way?
I thought about, after me and one of my buddies from West Virginia, we were thinking, we'll go back home. One of them he was going to be a coal miner, and I was going to go back home, go to school at Claremore Junior College, and I wanted to work at Claremore Indian Hospital, and that's roundabout ways of how it started. And my friend Arby up there at the top, I've seen him this year for the first time since 75, 76.
The one from West Virginia?
Yeah, that he come by and visited me. And we still in contact. And he wound up going into Army Reserve, and he retired. And say like, well, I retired out of the Oklahoma Army National Guard. So that was some of the highlights.
Right. So was it when you finally quit doing the Guard, was that a transition?
Not really.
Okay.
I was ready to get out.
You were ready then.
Yeah. They always tell you, you know, that you're don't leave without your 20-year letter. And it took them 21 years and 3 months to give me my 20-year letter.
20-year letter.
So.
Now, with Indian Health Service, you went to several interesting places. I mean, you were in Ada and Claremore, but also Dallas, but also Albuquerque, and Acoma.
Acoma, yes.
What are one or two highlights from your travels, I guess, those different places?
Well, I wasn't familiar with New Mexico, and say like those 2 years with OTFM in Albuquerque, that was great. And say like with Acoma, you know, there was three different tribes around there. The Canyoncito Navajos, the Acomas, Pueblos, and the Lagunas. And this was just a small little hospital, and I was a supply officer and a housing officer there, and responsible for vehicles plus supplies coming and going, receiving, purchasing, stuff like that. And that was really nice. But I had a terrible supervisor. And anyway, she was married to Acoma there, and I told her, you know, after those 5 years that, you know, one of us has got to leave, and it was me. And it's almost the same scenario in Gallup. I had a lady supervisor that after so long, you know, like that I had to leave. And I wound up in Dallas, and I had the best supervisor. He was an old salty Marine. And his boss was, you know, terrible in my books. You know, he was a Texas University grad. And we had a few Oklahoma engineers around there, and that was fun. So we would always talk Big 12, you know, in that regard. And it was just up the road, you know, from Oklahoma. So I really enjoyed it down there.
In your IHS service, did you run into many Shalako classmates?
Off and on.
Off and on.
Off and on. And I had friends with, you know, others.
Right.
That I acquired, and I'm blessed to this day that I still have them. So.
Are you a member of any Native Veterans groups or color guards right now?
No. I just sort of, with my dialysis, you know, it takes enough out of me. And it seems like with my kids, if and when I see them, you know, like that, that's a good thing. And then say like the people around Miami that I knew, I come back for their reunions, especially the class of '69. I come up here in 2009 for their 40-year reunion, and they acted like I was a lost sheep. I mean, it was such a transition from back in '65, you know, where I told you that prejudice was prevalent.
Right.
If your father did not work for B.F. Goodrich, you know, you weren't part of the establishment or what have you. But say like Miami, when B.F. Goodrich closed down it was such a transition. And it seemed like coming back to Claremore, working, and then seeing some of them and saying, hey, you know, my kids are going out there to the Indian clinic now. And I says, I didn't know you were Indian. So, I mean, you know, in that regard. But I still have my friends from the old neighborhood, what's left of them, and that it's great being back home. So.
Kind of coming full circle there.
Full circle.
You mentioned you stay in touch with some of your Army friends too.
Uh-huh. I even had a Marine friend come up from Tacoma, Washington, come by. And I have phone calls every now and then from an old retired Sergeant Major in Jacksonville, North Carolina. And I had my company commander that this guy was, that we were in the same unit. I hadn't seen him since '75, and he's living in Overland Park, Kansas now. And I get my emails, my Facebook, you know, that is some of the ways that
you stay in touch.
And I have, you know, brothers that have passed on, you know, adopted brothers, and to accept their kids as my own. So that's some of the blessings that I have.
Do you attend the Shalako reunions?
Yes.
Why are they important to you?
They're just as important as life, you know, in my mind. My cousin from Bloomfield, Missouri, comes over, and we go together, and that's great. I mean, you know, sometimes you see, you know, some you didn't see the year before, and it's getting fewer and fewer, but I enjoy it. I'm just amazed by some of the people that come as far as from Florida, Washington, Idaho, Montana, and you know, Shalako has tried to reach out to have their reunion in Albuquerque a couple times, Durant, Tulsa, and they used to flip-flop between there and Oklahoma City.
Yeah.
So go wherever you can, you know. So that's what I do.
How did your time at Shalako impact you personally?
Personally, I just say that, you know, that it was great. I mean, you know, I wouldn't ever think about not doing it again, you know. But I mean, you know, those people, the employees, the teachers, you know, I such great friendship, and it's a blessing.
What made Shalako unique in your mind from other, well, the public school experience? Some of those things are obvious, but maybe some things that you haven't mentioned.
Well, I mean, you know, you didn't have your mom telling you to get up, get out, and go to school, you know, like that. You had matrons, and you had classmates. You know, you had to share the same responsibilities of keeping your room clean. And if you didn't, you know, you got a detail. So those were the, you know, exciting portions. Or cleaning the TV room. white tile floors, and having to move all the chairs away and spilling cans of the Navajo's chewing skull, you know, or picking up pinyon seeds, you know. Those were two of the things that I did not like about the Navajos. But I mean, you know, we had our own faults. We smoked cigarettes and some of the activities that, you know, we shouldn't mention. Night hawking, you know, rendezvousing with girls, and I always said that, you know, I never did night hawk because I was afraid of that security dog, you know, that big old German Shepherd.
Right.
My luck, I would get caught. So I was sweet and innocent in those regards.
Oh. Is there anything else you'd like people to know or remember about Shalako?
Shalako was a great experience for me. I mean, I've got friends, like I said, from all over the United States, and the matrons, the teachers, the department heads, you know, all those things I really enjoyed. And if I was to do it again, I would. So that's.
Anything else we should talk about that we haven't mentioned?
Well, no, I don't think so.
Well, thank you very much for your time today, John.
Thank you.